Most of you are probably actually not going to be able to see this PowerPoint presentation the way I wish you could, but really it's as simplistic. I really don't put too much verbiage on this PowerPoint presentation. Rather, most of the things that I usually do at these types of town hall meetings is just more or less share some background in regards to what Senate Bill 76 is all about. Of course, we've got an excellent opportunity following this presentation for some good Q&A with some of the prime authors of the legislation. So before I actually even move to the next slide, Senate Bill 76, first of all, you've probably heard a little bit from, whether it's Facebook, some of your friends, your colleagues, what have you. You may have heard the term Real Reform 76. What is Real Reform 76? The Pennsylvania Association of Realtors, which is a 28,000 member trade association in Pennsylvania, more or less about a year and a half ago decided that school property tax reform is something that needs to be a key focal point for our legislative agenda. And we wanted to term our grassroots campaign by something that could really apply to what's happening here in Pennsylvania. You have so many different varying pieces of property tax legislation that's being discussed, and a lot of them more or less could be considered band-aids. We feel that Senate Bill 76 actually provides, quote-unquote, real reform, hence the Real Reform 76. Now this slide actually I could put in the very front or I could put it in the very end, but I'm going to just focus first on why the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors got active with Senate Bill 76. First things first, there might be some realtors that are in this room. The likelihood of you working with a realtor in the buying or selling of property in the past few years, past few decades, might be pretty high. So you may have an understanding that realtors, as an association, it's our responsibility, it's our goal to be able to advocate on behalf of individuals that own private property in Pennsylvania. So we take a look at a number of different things that affect the overall settlement process. We take a look at overall at a number of things that affect private property rights and what have you. And obviously we felt that school property taxes were something that were very high on our radar in terms of advocating for. So specifically for Senate Bill 76, we've done quite a bit of our own homework on Senate Bill 76. You may or may not be able to read this slide, but we've done 2 different economic studies, and we've also done 2 different surveys of Senate Bill 76. Now, these economic impact studies put us into a position where we could better understand exactly what Senate Bill 76 is all about. Even though we feel that overall it's a pretty simplistic bill as compared to any other type of really big piece of legislation out there, we wanted to be able to understand how is this going to fiscally impact all Pennsylvanians, not just our younger Pennsylvanians, but also our older Pennsylvanians. So we wanted to make sure that we had the more or less the right talking points in hand so that we knew exactly how it's going to affect all classes here in Pennsylvania. And further, the surveys really put us into a position where we could have a better understanding of exactly what is the sentiment in Pennsylvania. Obviously, individuals in this room might indicate to us that property taxes are a big burden. But we wanted to make sure that we were hearing the same type of sentiment across Pennsylvania. So I mentioned we did 2 different studies of Senate Bill 76. One of the studies more or less took a look at school property tax funding in general. And in that first study, we had learned that a majority of Pennsylvanians indicated that they felt it was Harrisburg's responsibility to do something about school property tax reform, and that really put us into a better position to understand exactly how we should move forward and what type of bill we need to select. And then further, the other survey took a look at overall approval of what's indicated in Senate Bill 76. 76 would eliminate property taxes, but it would increase the income and the sales tax. And we wanted to make sure that Pennsylvanians across the state, we're not just talking about certain geographical areas, we're talking about across the state, we wanted to make sure that all Pennsylvanians would be in favor of that. And from a 2-to-1 ratio, we learned that they would be in favor of that, even after learning that there would be an increase in the income as well as the sales tax. And you see that across all political parties. So that's something to also keep in mind. This is not something that is a Republican bill or a Democratic bill or an independent bill. You're seeing bipartisan support more so than any other type of really big piece of legislation in Pennsylvania right now. The fact that it is currently, you've got 25 co-sponsors, and the fact that it's split bipartisan, both sides of the aisle, you're really seeing that it really is something that means a lot to, it means a lot to individuals from both political parties. I mentioned that next bullet point, that property owners across Pennsylvania have told us that this is something that they felt is a primary concern for them. And our grassroots strategy in place. I am part of that grassroots strategy, so what that means is I'm going across Pennsylvania. I said it to a couple people today, but yesterday, for example, I was in Philadelphia. I went to Pottstown later in the day. I then went up to the Poconos last night. I came home to see my wife for like 5 minutes before I fell asleep. I then drove to York County this morning for a meeting. I then went to Harrisburg for another meeting, and now I'm here tonight. Next week is the same thing all over again. We're traveling across the state to be able to educate and really learn exactly how this is impacting different Pennsylvanians. And the same thing is being heard across Pennsylvania. In a couple weeks, I'm going to be back out in the western part of the state, primarily in the Pittsburgh, Butler County regions, and all the way up to Erie, doing 3 different town halls in 3 nights in a row. So our grassroots strategy is really primarily based around educating people about exactly what Senate Bill 76 is all about, and also learning from them how it's impacting them, because we want to make sure that we're speaking intelligently on their behalf. So some people may not even know what Senate Bill 76 is. So you're hearing me talk about it, and I should probably go over it a little bit so you have a better understanding of exactly what it's all about. Senate Bill 76, when you're talking about property tax reform in Pennsylvania, there have been, I'll start a little bit backwards. When I first came on board with Real Reform 76 to do this, I wanted to just have a better understanding of what are people saying about property tax reform in Pennsylvania. So I go into Google and I type in, I think I literally typed in, quotes, school property tax elimination in Google, and then I put Pennsylvania. This article comes up talking about the discussion that this particular bill has had in the Senate. It didn't look exactly like Senate Bill 76, so I took a look at the year, and I don't want to date myself, but it was written before I was born, this particular article. So as I'm looking through a number of different articles, you're seeing a number of different versions of different types of property tax reform that's taken place all the way back to the 1970s. So it's pretty interesting overall what's happened in this overall discussion, but you're also excited to see the amount of support that's been garnered for property tax reform here in Pennsylvania. So I mentioned it's simplistic. You take a look at other pieces of legislation, and some legislation indicates that there's specific individuals that might be excluded, some legislation that might indicate that the school district has an option whether or not they want to have some sort of reform or what have you. 76 is very simplistic. It eliminates school property taxes. If there are existing debts, those debts would then have to get paid off. But in replacement of the school property taxes, what ends up happening is the personal income tax as well as the sales tax would increase. The P.I.T. would increase from 3.07 to 4.34%, and then the sales tax would increase from 6 to 7%. We're talking a lot about Senate Bill 76, but there is a companion bill in the House, House Bill 76. Our focus right now is in the Senate, primarily because of the support that we've garnered in the past year alone. Currently, we've got 24 co-sponsors in the Senate. 26 co-sponsors, and I apologize for putting this up here, but 26 co-sponsors in the Senate, and we're at the point where we're talking with a number of different senators right now about possibly signing on. So that's, again, a part of our grassroots strategy is working across the state of Pennsylvania and really educating everybody about what Senate Bill 76 is all about, and using that momentum to push us forward. So another part of Senate Bill 76 is a lot of people question, exactly how does how do our schools get this funding? Well, the P.I.T. and the sales tax go into the Education Stabilization Fund, and the Education Stabilization Fund is a line item fund that would go directly back to the schools. And schools will see increases in their funds on a year-to-year basis every single year, but less than what they would have expected under property taxes. So that's something to keep in mind, that increases would still happen with school funding, but there's a different type of fund in place to be able to appropriate that. Something that's been brought up quite a bit, there are some school districts out there that have indicated, they're like, you know what, our residents love school property taxes. They love paying taxes. Now, I find that kind of hard to believe, but if their residents are that in favor of having taxes assessed on them, then the school board can implement further local taxes. However, the key is they have to go before a voter referendum, and that is the key. We felt that there needs to be a little bit more accountability for some of these school boards, and you cannot speak for all school boards because you certainly have a lot of very good school board members across Pennsylvania that are doing the right thing. But unfortunately, you have some circumstances where they are spending a little bit more at will. So we want to make sure that they are accountable for their actions. So Senate Bill 76 specifically put in the voter referendum portion. The next thing that gets discussed about Senate Bill 76 is the stability of personal income taxes as well as sales taxes. And that's obviously something that is very important, particularly during a recession like you saw back in 2009 and for the following couple of years. So state revenues from sales and income taxes have actually been more stable than other taxes that could have been looked at. It's very predictable, again, even during a down economy. And this study took a look again at what happened during the recession just to make sure, with the stability of these numbers, ensure that the Education Stabilization Fund continued to be able to give out that funding to school boards across Pennsylvania. And we learned that that would be the case. Now, I mentioned here AEG and the IFO. First off, the IFO is the Independent Fiscal Office. It's a nonpartisan office that works with the Pennsylvania legislature to more or less look at the numbers of any type of legislative proposal and deem whether or not those numbers would work. AEG is the Anderson Economic Group. In the beginning of my slide, I had mentioned that the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors had done 2 different studies on this bill, and we partnered with Anderson Economic Group. So we wanted to make sure that both the IFO's numbers and the AEG numbers would be correct. So we obviously wanted to contract out to AEG to get these numbers. AEG happens to be one of the only a handful of economic groups in the entire country that can take a look at legislative proposals like this and really understand line by line how a state government's budget would work. That's part of the reason we picked AEG. They're actually based out of Chicago, so the economist that we work with out there, you wouldn't believe how often he is in Pennsylvania specifically working on Senate Bill 76. One of the things that ends up happening whenever I'm out at town hall meetings or if I'm on Facebook or someone just gives me a phone call or, I don't know, anything. Any way someone contacts me, a lot of times what will end up happening is people will reach out to me and say, you know what, I've heard this. Is that true? Well, there are a few myths that we have heard in regards to Senate Bill 76, and I think it's important to make sure that everybody here is aware of the truth behind some of these myths. So one of the myths that we've heard is that it's a threat to local control that we want our school districts to be empowered with. First and foremost, a lot of times what will happen is federal government or state government, sometimes they'll put mandates on different types of legislation so that a local government has to spend money X, Y, and Z ways or what have you. Senate Bill 76, all the money that's coming back from the Education Stabilization Fund, what's going to end up happening is there are no earmarks on that. There are no mandates. These school districts are able to spend these dollars for their operating costs as they wish. If they want more funds, again, they can acquire some of these funds. However, what they'll have to do is, again, go before a voter referendum to request the voters to take action on whether or not there would be a tax increase. Another big thing that we've heard quite often is, the math doesn't work. There's going to be a shortfall a few years from now. The math just simply does not work. Well, I could honestly talk for about an hour about how the math does work. AEG as well as the IFO both indicate that the math does work. Clearly, the IFO report actually states that school boards are actually spending beyond their means. So saying it in a different way, most people here, I would assume that most people here in their day-to-day jobs are not receiving increases in their salary at double the rate of inflation. If you are, give me a phone call a little bit later on. Might talk about finding a job with you guys at some point. But many school boards across Pennsylvania have been spending at double the rate of inflation. And that's put a lot of people into a position where, obviously, they're not seeing increases in their salary, but they are seeing increases in their taxes. So what the IFO report did was, when they did long-term projections, they took a look at more or less what have school boards been doing in the past and what will they likely do in the future. So again, I go back to something a point I made earlier. What the Education Stabilization Fund does via Senate Bill 76 is it does provide for increases year to year, but it would be less than what would be seen via property taxes. Another big thing that we hear quite often is sales tax. Sales tax is actually going to hurt more people than property tax. I'm going to tell you this much. If you're buying 2 cars a year, or if you're buying like 15 different $5,000 suits or what have you, you might be able to start matching what you're paying in property taxes. You would have to honestly be spending thousands of dollars more in taxable items to be able to equal what you're paying in property taxes. So property taxes, as I'm mentioning here, property taxes are kicking people out of their homes. In the short, homeowners are going to save more money by eliminating these property taxes. And a homeowner, again, is going to have to spend a significant amount in taxable items to match the amount paid in these overall property taxes. There are several other myths, but rather than going through it all, I'd rather discuss things via the Q&A later on in case people do have some questions. So the biggest thing right now to keep in mind is the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors is active in this primarily because our members have heard from their clients, individuals like yourself, anybody that's buying or selling a home, anybody that owns a home right now or owns property, because Senate Bill 76 does not just apply for residential property. It applies to all property in Pennsylvania. So the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors recognizes this is something that we as an association have to go out and have to advocate on behalf of our members and their clients. But there, of course, is you guys, and you guys are in a position to really help us out quite a bit further. First and foremost, we encourage everybody, and what I'll do is I'll hand out, I have some brochures, I have my business card, which has my cell phone, it has my email address as well. But we encourage everybody to visit realreform76.com. I've got that, again, that website on the information, so you can have that information following me being done up here. But we encourage you to visit that website. On the website, you have an opportunity to contact your senator, and then from there, you also have the opportunity to share your story. In just about 2 months alone, we've had about 15,000 people visit our website and take action. Among that, we've also had, I forget the number exactly, but we've had a number of, hundreds of individuals share their story with us. So what does that mean? So I'm hearing literally stories from individuals that are seniors. I'm hearing stories from younger people, pretty much all across the realm, just indicating what property taxes have done to them. So you're able to share your story. If you want to remain anonymous, you can remain anonymous. But sometimes what we like to do is utilize those stories as talking points. So whenever we're speaking with a member of the state Senate, it puts us into a position to more or less leverage vote on their behalf. Now, something interesting about this area, first off, Senator Folmer has been an extremely awesome champion at Senate Bill 76, and he should be certainly applauded for that. So contacting him, I mean, you can continue to contact him, but he's certainly going to continue to advocate on behalf of Senate Bill 76. But if you do not live in Lebanon County, you live outside the area, or you have family and friends that live outside the area, the biggest thing I tell people to do is talk about Senate Bill 76. You talk about property tax reform across Pennsylvania, and again, I'm telling you, I'm visiting everywhere across Pennsylvania. Everyone is talking about property tax reform to some point, but not everybody understands exactly what Senate Bill 76 is all about. Even though we've gained quite a bit of supporters over the past year, they still don't realize how much one piece of legislation could really positively impact their life. They do not know what Senate Bill 76 is all about. So what we're trying to do is continue to educate people that there is a bill in place to help to eliminate school property taxes. I mentioned here writing letters to the editor. There's a number of different ways that you can get involved. I say writing letters to the editor primarily in areas where you see your legislators not currently yet in support of this bill. I do encourage individuals that are not necessarily in a legislative district that is represented by somebody that supports 76. I encourage them, listen, bring me in for a town hall meeting. We can discuss different ways that you guys can mobilize grassroots-wise in order to more or less advocate your elected officials to co-sponsor both House Bill and Senate Bill 76. So there are a number of ways that you can get involved. Following the Q&A, again, what I'll do is I'll provide my contact information out to everybody. What I encourage you to do, if you want to see Senate Bill 76 pass, I encourage you to shoot me an email or give me a phone call, and we can talk about different ways that you can leverage your connections, leverage your abilities to be able to position Senate Bill 76 as a piece of legislation that can end up passing. Thank you.
My question is, I understand that there's legislation, the legislation is out there. There are amendments to this legislation coming up. When can we expect to see these amendments that will enhance this bill?
Pretty much any of us could actually touch that question.
What was the question?
The question, I'll repeat the question first. The gentleman indicated that obviously the bill is out there, but right now there's some discussion in regards to amendments. When can we see the amendments get brought out, as well as a potential vote on the Senate floor? In short, what some of the prime authors of the legislation are doing right now, and when I say right now, I'm talking about in real time, over the past couple weeks into the next couple weeks. We're taking a look at various amendments that might make the bill a little bit better, but we do expect, again, because we do have 25 co-sponsors on the bill, we do expect a vote to be taking place relatively pretty soon. But when I say pretty soon, we don't actually have a date in mind. Originally, the original time frame that was discussed was potentially in January. At this point, I would say probably closer to February. We could probably see a vote, but it's difficult to put a timetable down because there's so many different questions that continue to get brought up, and the senators that I have spoken with that are currently not yet on this bill have indicated that they want to go back and speak with their constituents a little bit further. I'm sure David may have heard some of the same sentiment from different senators, but I think they're waiting to hear more in regards to do their constituents want to see school property tax reform.
Somebody else will ask another question. What more can we do on part of Pennsylvania, which is email participation tax? What more can we do to get the word out there? We have 150 members that have just signed up with us. The other groups have other members. So there's got to be at least 500 people that we contact on a weekly basis. What more can we do to help promote this?
What Chuck just said, we said earlier in his presentation, is a good point. And that's spread the word to as many people as you possibly can across the state to try to get support for this bill. I think what a lot of folks don't understand is that this is not the typical kind of legislation you get out of Harrisburg. This is true grassroots legislation. It was drafted in conjunction with Representative Jim Cox, who's your neighbor, right over here in Berks County. But he allowed us, as taxpayer groups, to be an integral part of the drafting of this legislation. We approved everything that's in it. Our suggestions were incorporated into the bill. Pennsylvania doesn't have citizen initiative and referendum. In this case, this is as good as it's going to get. We helped to draft this bill. This people belongs to us, the people of Pennsylvania. And because it's been done that way, we don't have all the support in Harrisburg that we should, because it doesn't have any perks in it for the politicians. It doesn't have any perks for the special interests. It's driven by the citizens. And we're going to have it enacted in the same way. Drive it from the bottom up, grassroots, and that's why it's so important for you, if you believe in the bill and believe in what we're trying to accomplish, to push this bill to everyone you know and get them to support it. Specifically, right now, next step in the bill is the Senate Finance Committee. It has to be voted out of committee, and the best thing you can do right now is contact members of the Senate Finance Committee and ask them to support the bill. And I will emphasize, be respectful, be courteous, and non-threatening. But call them, email them, write to them, whatever. Members of the Senate Finance Committee are most important right now. After that, trying to bring more senators on board as co-sponsors. 26 co-sponsors, that's better than half the Senate. And although Chuck didn't mention it, our Senate split right now is 13 Republicans and 13 Democrats. Doesn't get any better than that. So we know we have bipartisan support. We just would like to draw a few more on to absolutely make sure the vote passes when the bill comes to the Senate floor. That help, George?
That's it.
Okay.
When the bill finally passes both houses, is there a clause in it that says it can never come back to property tax? Or will there be?
We are going to have a companion constitutional amendment. The only way to guarantee that it can never be reinstated is by doing it that way. If you're familiar with how that's done, that has to pass 2 sessions of the legislature and a voter referendum. That's not something that can necessarily run concurrently with the legislation itself. But yes, there is a companion constitutional amendment to forever forbid the use of property taxes to finance schools in Pennsylvania.
And if that doesn't pass muster, then they can come back someday and bite us again.
That possibility exists. I will say this, once the school property taxes are gone, I think the politicians would have a real tough time trying to reinstate them. And again, hey, anything's possible, and we know that.
One of the things I've done, I encourage other people to do the same, and I'm going to ask you this question. I've recently been sending emails to Governor Corbett's office. I've been polite, but also very direct. I made it clear to him and to all the representatives and senators that I think this is the year that this has to be passed, that if they don't support us clearly and in public, that they will be voted out. What are you guys doing, or what is our organization doing to make sure that they understand that this is it, that it's an election year, and that they really need to get behind the bill?
Well, I can tell you right now, John Kissinger, stand up. Joe Eisenhower, stand up. These are both candidates that will be seeking election. I can tell them both. When it comes to the 912, this is the issue this year. Not just this year, it's been an issue. Property rights is a fundamental issue within our organization, not just in terms of real estate, but property entirely. We are looking at these guys. We're weighing out where they're at on these issues. Of course, we're also looking at our elected representatives. Mari Gingrich is not a co-sponsor. And she had said that she would vote for the bill if it came up on the floor for a vote. When the day of the amendment came up, she excused herself from the floor so she didn't have to make that vote. And then she supported an alternative bill, which is a nightmare. That would actually expand the school board's authority of taxation into 3 other areas and leave voter referendum completely out of it. And we can't afford this. It's an unsustainable thing. So from an election point, that's part of what we're doing. You got to raise up candidates from within your own area. I believe there's another candidate who will be announcing for locally within the next week or so. So that's part of what you do. Another thing that you've got to understand, your local elections are run by committee people. They decide endorsements, they decide you know, and by the time an endorsement is made, that's pretty much the vote. It's hard to unseat the endorsed candidate. It happens. Here's an example of that. Not just an endorsed candidate, Chip Brightbill. So, you know, no small feat there. But the committee is where it starts. And once the endorsement is made, it's really hard to bring in someone outside. And what happens in that process is we don't have the debates then. We don't have the discussions that need to happen, that we can get to know these guys. We can know where they stand on the issues, and we can listen to them, you know, one week and listen to them the next week and find out if they're lying to us. Because Lord knows we have enough of that in Harrisburg and in Washington. It's got to start with the committee. You've got to go to your committee people. You elect them. They represent you. You go to your committee people, you call them up on the telephone, and you tell them, this is an important issue to me. Where do the candidates stand on this issue? Because they're going to be doing the interviews. They're going to be talking to these candidates behind the scene. And that's where it starts. Once we understand that this is really how elections take place, it starts there and it raises up, then we can get to find out where these guys are at, and we can, a very founding principle, it's in our declaration, that just governments derive their powers from the consent of the governed. In order to give our consent, we have to know what these guys believe. In order to give our consent in our vote, we have to know where they stand on the issues. So that's another way that we do this. You don't just look at these two or the other. Look at the people who are your committee people. If you're a Republican, you have Republican committee people. If you're a Democrat, you have Democrat committee. And we have both here tonight. We have Democrat and Republican committee people here. You guys need to hear this. And this came up in our meeting. We would like to see open elections for these seats. We don't want to see an endorsement. We want these people to be out in front of us, and we were asked when the 9/12 is having our candidates night by people on the committee, and my question to the committee is, when are you having a candidates night? When are you bringing the candidates out and putting them in front of the people? Why is it the 9/12's job, although that's what we do? I know I'm off the HB/SB 76, but if you want to see this passed, don't just focus on your senators. Don't just focus on your House members. Elections start at the committee level. And if you have a problem with your committee, run. Go out and seek the position, because they control elections more than most people realize. It starts there, then you get behind the candidates that you know are supporting you on these issues. And frankly, I'm not generally a one-issue candidate, a one-issue voter. That changes for this election. We don't have the time anymore. If you look at the IFO report, if you look at the report from that PAR had done, if you look at these reports and you look at the long term, 10 years down the road, the homeowner in the state of Pennsylvania is screwed. This is no longer sustainable. And you may think you're okay now, but you won't be in 10 years. There's a pension bomb coming. And we're just starting to feel it now. But in 5 years, and they're projecting this is going to go, they were telling us just 5 years, but this is going to go into 2036, 2037 before it starts actually coming down. By that time, how many people? I mean, we're losing 10,000. We're $1 billion right now. We are $1 billion in debt related to property tax in the state. $1 billion behind. It's just no longer sustainable. And it's going to destroy and it is destroying the economy of the state, because it's a foul, disgusting, and evil tax. And those kind of taxes will do this to your economy. They eat out the soul of the economy. This will free up the economy in the state and return us to a more constitutional form of government. And Mike and
I don't know if you have any o'clock or not.
It's in my suit though, so I actually went to reach for it. It wasn't there.
Remember your committee. It starts there.
Terry mentioned something about writing to the governor, and just a few of my own personal thoughts on this. I guess all of you who follow politics know that the governor's re-elect numbers are in the toilet. Right now, it doesn't look like the man stands a chance. Passage of this legislation would make a huge difference for him, and I don't know if that matters to you or not, but the point of this is, he gives his budget address in early February. If he was to come out and champion this bill during his budget address, it would make a huge difference for him, and he has to be pushed into this issue. He has said on 5 different occasions that he will sign the bill if it's revenue neutral and reaches his desk. But that's all he's done. He could take a much stronger stand on this. He could advocate for the bill. And I would suggest those of you who are Republicans, as Jim said, go to your local committee and let them know you're not going to vote for Tom Corbett. He will not get your vote unless he champions this bill. Write to Corbett's re-elect campaign committee and tell them the same thing. I'm a Republican, he's not getting my vote. Jack Wagner announced. Didn't hear that, sorry. Jack Wagner, I know it goes against the grain for a lot of you who are conservatives, who don't want to vote for a Democrat, but Jim and I both have experience with Jack Wagner. I didn't realize he'd announced. Jack Wagner, during the last campaign, during the primaries, Stan Moore got up and talked very passionately about property tax elimination. Jack Wagner, a Democrat, got up immediately after him and said, "There's nothing more I can say. I agree with everything Sam said." Jack Wagner would be a good alternative, and again, if you're a staunch conservative, you might want to hold your nose and consider voting for him if Tom Corbett does not come out in favor of this bill. But you can pressure Corbett right now and let him know you don't get my vote if you don't champion this bill. That's my personal opinion of this. Thank you. Okay.
Gentlemen, I'm sorry. At any rate, it's just as bad down there as it is up here, as far as taxes go. My question is, I have been hearing a lot of other folks about a competitive bill that has been passed in the House. Why is that one? You know what I'm talking about? 789. Why is that not as good as 76? What's wrong with it? We care to tell us a little bit about that? So why is 76 better than 189?
Well, the biggest problem with the bill, well, first of all, if you follow House Bill 1189, and if you studied history, it's very similar to what Governor Bob Casey tried to do back in 1986, 1987, and it was rejected unanimously. It was rejected overwhelmingly by the citizens of Pennsylvania. The problem with the bill, sir, is this: it does not eliminate school property tax. That tax is still there, and it introduces three new taxes to offset any increases to property taxes. And seeing the real question to all of this is that over the long run, we need to find a way to get the cost of education under control. And a lot of that has to deal with things outside of what 76 can do. But that bill, I believe, would be a disaster. Because what you have is, you're going to have what your existing property taxes are. And then you're going to get 3 new taxes on top of that. And until we get school costs under control, and that is dealing with the pension and such, and relieving these mandates and such going forward, you're just going to see those new taxes are just going to be higher. And you'll still have a high property tax. It's not a good bill.
Can I elaborate on it? The bill was House Bill 1189, introduced by Representative Seth Grove of York County. It allows for 3 new taxes: a mercantile tax, which is a gross receipts tax on all businesses in the school district, a local earned income tax, and a business privilege tax. The school board, at their option in each district, can choose to use any combination of those taxes to reduce property taxes. The sponsor of the bill said they can eliminate them, and that's not going to happen. And if they only use it to reduce the property tax, they can still continue to raise the property tax. What it's doing is giving the school boards 3 more methods to tax, and no way, as Senator Folmer said, to put any kind of a cap on the spending. Again, I'm going to get personal with this. Those of you who know me know I'm not reticent about speaking my mind. We feel that House Bill 1189 was introduced for one reason, to try to kill HB 76 in the House, as a distraction from HB 76. It is supported by the House GOP leadership. In fact, the House GOP leadership is the ones who pushed this bill. They wanted to try to kill 76. For those of you who are staunch Republicans, the House GOP leadership is not on our side in this. Mike Turzai, Stan Saylor, the whip, oppose HB 76. They are doing what they can in the background to work against it, and that's what 1189 comes down to. They were never serious about it. It does nothing. It does absolutely nothing for the people of Pennsylvania, yet they're saying it's the most wonderful thing to slice bread, and all they're trying to do is deceive us. It looks to me, and you can verify this if you like, Senator Folmer, that it's not going to go anywhere in the Senate. Fortunately, the senators are smart enough to understand that the bill's a fraud. But anything comes up about 1189, oppose it. It does absolutely nothing for us. We've got to get 76 passed instead.
There's another thing about this bill. We have a school board, a Lebanon City school board member with us tonight. And I think that he could address the unfunded mandates that come down from the state that impact our school boards, that even when a school board tries to be fiscally responsible, it's almost impossible. They're forced to go into these increases because of the unfunded mandates. The reason that our legislators and the Department of Education can push these unfunded mandates down is because there is a property tax. If they had to account for how much these things, these programs actually cost the state, we would actually find out how much these things are costing the state, a lot of the stuff would never happen. And a lot of the stuff is unnecessary. I mean, we've gone through more than enough changes in the educational system to know that things like open classrooms were just an expense that was paid for on the tax, but it was untested. And who knows where Common Core is going to take us? Who knows where these other programs, that are all coming down to our school boards, that they have to pay for this. You know, I talk to school board members who look at me and they say, at the end of the day, I don't care where the money comes from. I just know I got to pay the bills. So not all your school board, and that frustrates me with the governor when he says, well, take the issue to your school board. Well, they're just paying the bills that are being pushed in some cases. They're just paying the bills that are being pushed down from the state level. We need to push this back up. Our Constitution says that the General Assembly shall provide for a thorough and efficient form of education, not your local school board. And your school board will tell you that there's a massive amount of regulations, mandates that they must abide. The only thing they really have control over is how much they're going to raise your taxes, and even that's regulated at the state. Contracts, regulated at the state level. Everything is regulated at the state. We need to push this back up there, because local control is a myth. It doesn't exist. It's an absolute myth. People who've been serving in school board will tell you that, if they're being honest with you, and they'll talk to you about the unfunded mandates. By pushing this back up on the state, you're actually going to save some money in education spending. And 1189 isn't going to do any of that. 1189 is actually going to make it easier for more unfunded mandates to come down to the state level, because it gives them more options in taxation. So, you know, one year you tick off the homeowners by raising the property tax. The next year you tick off, you know, through the sales tax, or you tick off the business. You can rotate it and move it around. And this isn't a solution for us. It's not even relief. This is a ticket to raise your taxes. That's all 1189 is.
Something like a shell game.
Yes.
It's still there, you just don't know which shell it's under each year.
Right.
Thank you.
we can show that it is revenue neutral, he will back it. And I put him on the spot. I says, if I can have a meeting with you and a couple of members of your organization that can show him that it is revenue neutral, he has guaranteed me he will back it. In fact, he's looking for things to come out to show and help his numbers. We'll all be honest, he's been taking a beating on a lot of things. And so if you can give me the names of the people that want to meet with the governor, and we will take, and I will keep bugging him until such time as we get that meeting.
The head of Tom Corbett's campaign staff has been contacted that we would be willing to sit down with him and discuss this. We have not received a response from him. He was contacted, actually he was contacted within 12 hours after I had a phone conversation with you this weekend. Okay. They have not returned that call. As far as this being revenue neutral, how many times do they have to be told?
Okay, but what I'm saying is we're going to put his feet to the fire, and I'm going to put your feet to the fire. You get together the group that wants to meet with them, and I'll try and get you that meeting.
Tom, what's the question?
Tom, I'll tell you this. I'll tell you this. I can get Senator Argle. I will go. Our chief of staff will be there, and we'll be glad to show them all the numbers. Ladies and gentlemen, here's the deal. This is really the real deal here. This bill has been vetted, re-vetted, and it's being vetted some more. Am I right, David? You were just in a meeting this afternoon. You were there how many hours today working on amendments?
5 hours.
5 hours, all right? And we're not done yet. Because we are trying to make this bill the right thing to do. And why do I say that it's the right thing to do? Folks, we are presently funding our school systems under a 19th century mode of funding our schools in the 21st century. We are shrinking the base of funding our schools every year. That base gets shrunk. We had to do clean and green to protect our farmers. We had to now there's talk about freezing it for bringing Keno into the state so that we can freeze it for the seniors. And that will only shrink the base even further. What this bill will do is it broadens the burden, well, it's not the burden, our responsibility to educate our children to a greater number of people. That's all we're trying to do. And ladies and gentlemen, this is not an elimination of the tax. I'm going to just be upfront with you. This is a tax shift, plain and simple. And it would probably be the greatest tax shift in the history of Pennsylvania. Amen. And that is what's bringing the fear. But I will tell you, as someone who has been intimately involved and have worked and acting like a missionary with my cohorts in the Republican caucus, Dave Argle and I split up our membership, and we went to each member to gain additional add-ons to our to this bill, as did Judy Swank and Senator Udachak on the Democrat side. And that's how we ended up with 13 and 13. We have 13 Republicans and 13 Democrats. It's bipartisan. But the biggest resistance I see on this bill is this. And just bear with me here. There's a reason why I'm going to tell you this little story. When I was elected back in 2006, I went to every editorial board in Pennsylvania that represented the 48th district. And to the board, they said this to me after I left those board meetings. They said, Mike, we admire your passion. We admire your idealism, but you have to get real. So I left that meeting thinking, what is this realism that is not my idealism? So I came up with this definition. I said that their so-called realism was my idealism that has been sacrificed on the altar of self-interest. And the proponents against this bill is purely sacrificing principles upon on the altar of self-interest. I am telling you, the PSEA hates this bill dramatically. They hate it because you know why? Because we will temper their contract abilities to hold each school district hostage. The other thing this bill does, folks, it's going to force us in the legislature to do our job finally, to deal with the funding formulas, to deal with the school code of 1949 and get rid of those unfunded mandates thrusted upon our school districts and get out of the way of our school districts and allow them to do their jobs. Okay? That's what this bill will do. Now, they can say they want to see if it's revenue neutral all day long. We have showed them, if anything, we're about $300 million over. We're bringing right now, the way the bill is written right now, we're bringing an additional $300 million. We don't want to be totally, we don't want to be on the plus side, because that means that's additional taxes. We want to be Zippo. We want to be neutral on this thing. So, I can't tell you that, and finally, I'll just say this, the time is now. We need to do this now. And this would be such a plus for the state of Pennsylvania. Chuck, what's the numbers that what's the number of billions of dollars that would be thrusted back into the economy through disposable income?
$12.7 billion.
$12.7 billion automatically thrusted back. What happens when people have money in their pockets? What do? They put a new roof on their house. They'll buy whatever, maybe a new heat pump, whatever. Maybe paint their home, or so forth. Right? We'll capture that money back through the expanded sales tax, and and such. You know, this is about owning your home. And then lastly, and then I'm going to shut up. All right? Back in 2006, when I ran for the first time, we were down in Elverson, Pennsylvania, which is in Chester County, at this little borough in Chester County. It was a district that was gerrymandered by the best, I have to tell you. But there was this little borough called Elverson. And my son and I were doing door to door. My son was carrying my yard signs. I was looking at the street list, and a gentleman was mowing his lawn down in Elverson. It was on kind of a hill. And he saw my son and I walk, and he turned off his lawnmower, and he comes walking down to me and introduced himself. His first name was Charlie. I cannot remember his last name. Charlie was 82 years old at that time. Charlie was a World War II veteran. He landed on D-Day on June 6, 1944, and he was the last man standing, original member of his company, when the war was over for him in Belgium. He said to me, he said, Mike, he said, I did everything I was supposed to do. I defended my country. I defended the rights of its citizens. I protected and preserved their freedoms. I put my children through school. I paid my bills. I bought my home. But my wife died last year, and I can't afford my property taxes. Now, you know what, Mike? I'm an older guy, and someday I'm probably going to want to move because this house is just a little bit too big for me. But I should be able to make that decision, not the government. It should be left up to me to make that decision. And he said that with tears in his eyes. And I will never, ever forget Charlie, because that is so important, to be able to say that you own your home. You know, Article 1, Section 1 of our state constitution. Article 1, by the way, is our Bill of Rights in our state constitution. In Article 1, Section 1 of our state constitution, I wish I would have brought it, and I apologize. It's in my suit code, and I apologize. But Article 1, I'll paraphrase this with you. Besides that, we're all created, all men are created equal and such. It says that we have an indefeasible and inalienable right to acquire, possess, and protect our property and reputation, and to pursue our happiness. How can you protect and your property if you can be forced off of it for no fault of your own? If there's one place that should be safe, it should be that. Now, folks, this is just dealing with the school property tax. Let me put that out there to you. You're still going to have county taxes. They're still there. But that would take a true constitutional amendment. We'd have to change the Constitution for that. But school property taxes are not tied to that. That was added on later on. As a matter of fact, the original sales tax, when the sales tax was first introduced in Pennsylvania, the sales tax was what, 1% or 2%? 1% in
1953 for education.
Yeah, right, it was 1953, 1%. David, I should let you tell this. It was 1%. And it was for education. We're just returning to the roots. We're going to have an expanded sales tax and a slight increase with P.I.T. We tried to protect everybody with this. There's no perfect bill. But I will tell you this. I believe it would be a win-win for Pennsylvania, and it would force us in the legislature to finally do our jobs rather than always passing the counting or downhill.
I wanted to apologize first for being late. I had another meeting tonight. The Republican Executive Committee met, and I'm always on the agenda to give a legislative update, so it's usually toward the end, so I had to stay until that was done. But I am 100% in support of school property tax elimination. As most of you know, I think it has a better chance in the Senate, really. And if it comes over to us from the Senate, my leadership is going to be faced with the pretty tough decision. Right now, I can tell you, I'm sorry that they don't support it. They feel they don't want to take the local control of school budgets away, which they feel this would do. All the money, of course, if this tax system is changed, would go to Harrisburg and then have to be parceled out to the schools from Harrisburg. So, and not only is the PSEA against it, but the PSBA, the School Boards Association, is against it. The unions that represent those people are vehemently against it. And, but we've come a long way. I mean, I'm surprised at really how much support this effort has garnered in the years that I've been up there. And it's coming from the people, the grassroots. The people want to see it happen. And if we can just get, keep the people talking about it and approaching their legislators and advocating for it, that's the only way we're going to get it done.
I was wondering if we have any updates on numbers. The last I heard, the average figure was like $567. Has that changed? The break-even point was around there. The new taxes would cost the average person $560. So if you're paying more than that in school property tax, this bill would benefit you by it.
Actually, what the real numbers are is this. And the last time I looked at it, and I could be off by 1,000 or 2, so forgive me, but for every $1,000 that you pay in property taxes, you would have to spend an additional, I believe it's 14,000 or is it 16,000? Yeah, so it's closer to 6. You would have to spend an additional 16. For instance, if your property taxes are $3,000, what's 3 times 16?
It's 3,500. That's 48 average.
Yeah.
$50,000.
Yeah, $50,000. There you go.
For a $3,500 property tax bill, you have to spend $50,000 on yearly tax or items and services.
Yeah, I think I was basing my math on Dave's original numbers. If I pay more than $560 a year, then you will save money.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
That sounds pretty good.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Yeah, never mind, I misunderstood you. Sorry.
You've heard local control, for those of you who have not been to a 9/12 meeting. This is the Public School Code of 1949. This is just the part that deals with K through 12 education. This is Title 22. This is legislative. This is the Department of Education. This is Title 22 of the Pennsylvania Code. Inside this, page after page after page, if you look inside this book, we'll leave them out, you'll find yellow highlighted areas. What those are citations to the actual law. It's not, the entire law isn't in here. It's just the citations to the law. These are the controls over education. And we talk about local control like it really exists. And you want to talk about prevailing wage? It's in here. You want to talk about contracts? It's in here. Our local school boards aren't making those calls. Even when they go to negotiation, arbitration, It's in here. They have to follow the rules. And all of that costs us at the local level. It's why this needs to be shifted. Education, I believe that education is important, and I believe the education of our children is critical. In the same breath, education is mandated by the state, it is regulated by the state, it's controlled by the state, and it's about damn time we started paying the bills. Because they're cutting our school board short. They've helped to underfund the pension. Who's going to pay for that? During the House debate on this, when HB 76 was introduced as an amendment to 1189, Eli Avankovic stood on the floor of the House and said, how are we going to pay for the pension if we eliminate the property tax? I want to know why it's my responsibility. Why somebody has to lose their house so somebody else can retire at 54, and we call that just government? That's not just government to me. I believe that our teachers should be compensated. I believe they should be compensated well for what they do if they're a good teacher. But to honestly think that everybody just because they teach is a good teacher, that's not true. We need to have the protection on the consumer as well, on the homeowner, on the property owner as well. So I'm ranting now.
Talk about misinformation. Does this involve not only personal real estate but also corporate?
Everything.
Everything.
All. Uniformity clause of the Pennsylvania Constitution says that all entities in the taxing body must be taxed at the same rate. You can't have different rates of taxation for businesses and for homeowners. To do that would require a constitutional amendment. We can't afford to wait that long. But the other part of this is the Independent Fiscal Office report that both Chuck and Jim talked about said that this is a quote from them, would clearly attract business to Pennsylvania by the elimination of the school property tax. Pennsylvania right now is 49th in the nation in job growth. Our business tax climate is absolutely terrible. Forgetting the corporate net income tax and the rest of the taxes, simply eliminating the school property tax would help to attract the businesses and the jobs they create to Pennsylvania. So it doesn't make sense to even try to kill businesses. The other thing is, 80% of all non-government jobs in Pennsylvania are provided by small businesses. Whenever the opponents try to say, well, it eliminates for businesses, you shouldn't do that, and they scream Walmart and Exxon. Walmart and Exxon are only a small part of the pot. It's the family grocery stores, the small businesses, the sole proprietorships that are providing jobs in Pennsylvania, and they don't get any kind of tax breaks at all. This would be huge for them as well, and again, would help to generate jobs. So that I expanded on what you asked, but that's the answer to your question.
And so why don't we hear more from their corporate side, from the business side?
I don't know. I can't answer that question. I don't know.
I think some of it is related to the fact of the misinformation that's out there, the business-to-business tax. One other aspect about the property tax that a lot of us don't realize. You go to the grocery store and you buy a loaf of bread. The farmer who grew the wheat, property tax. You're helping to pay that. He ships that wheat to the bakery. They're paying property tax. The shipping company is paying property tax. Then it gets sent to the retailer, and the retailer's paying property tax, and you're paying all of that. Because, look, businesses aren't in business to lose money. You don't stay in business very long. So it all comes back to you. You are paying your property tax, you're paying the property tax on that farm that grew the wheat, you're paying the property tax on the business that baked the wheat, and you're paying the property tax on the shipping company that shipped the wheat, and you're paying the property tax of the retailer who sold you that loaf of bread. So this notion about the corporate tax, when we say, oh, we can't eliminate for corporations. You eliminate for corporations and you eliminate for me, and you eliminate for you. You eliminate for everybody. And that's fair taxation. That's just taxation, not what we have now. We're paying too much of this, I guess A lot of legislators think it's okay to tax you so long as you can't see the tax. We'll hide it underneath something. We'll call it a fee. We'll do whatever, but we're going to hide the tax, and then it's okay, because it's not really a tax, because you're not paying a direct tax. Frankly, I would rather pay a direct tax than an indirect tax that's hidden behind closed doors. And when you go to the store and you buy that pair of pants, you buy that loaf of bread, you buy the sound system, your DVD player, no matter what you buy, you are paying the property taxes of all the people that were involved in the manufacturing of that product. And it drives up the cost of consumer goods for all of us.
It's very rare and where people can see what they have to spend in taxable items to even get near what they're paying in property tax.
Well, we have that rough number. We have that rough number.
Where is it? Where do you see
the rough number that Senator Folmer mentioned.
Yeah.
Divide your property tax by your school property tax by 0.07. That will be the new tax rate. That will tell you how much you have to spend on newly taxed items and services to equal the amount of property tax eliminated. To answer your question about businesses, there's a disconnect between the Chamber, the NFIB, and their members, National Federation of Independent Businesses. Business people we've spoken to absolutely support the bill. For some reason, their state organization is not getting that message. Senator Folmer said a lot of misinformation out there. They'd be much better served to learn about the bill, but we know individual businesses support this bill. There's no question about it. Maybe that's what we need. Maybe we need the individual businesses to go back to the NFIB and say, I'm not paying your dues anymore until you get behind this bill. You got somebody locally who can do it. You want to bring it up, Jim? I won't mention his name. But you've got somebody locally who's in charge of the NFIB and is a rabid opponent of the bill. No reason why, at least no good reason why.
Thank you.
We're gonna, we have the room tonight until 9 o'clock, so we're gonna have to wrap the Q&A.
Well, I just want to thank the 912 group for having this forum tonight. I think it's very informative, and it gives you a lot of information to talk to your neighbors and your friends. Please tell them the facts about this so that people know exactly how beneficial this would be to them. And Mike, I'm counting on the Senate. I'm counting on the Senate to get the bill over to us. We need to do that. And I thank Dave Baldinger, too, for all the work he does. Gosh, he sends me a lot of emails and really has educated me on a lot of things that are happening out there that I'm not aware of. So thank you very much for everything. And thank you all for coming tonight and your interest in this subject.
I'll be real quick because I hogged the mic up earlier and I don't want to contribute too much to global warming, and although maybe that might be necessary now since it's how cold it's been. But anyway, I want to let you know this, and I'm going to be more positive in all this. Folks, we're on the cusp in the state of Pennsylvania to be great again. We really, really are. And I'm looking at SB 76 as just one finger on a fistful of fingers to make Pennsylvania great again. And if we could do this and then get paycheck protection and then get right to work, Pennsylvania, the Keystone State, will have so much going for it. We will bring careers to Pennsylvania, not just jobs, but careers to Pennsylvania that will put disposable income into people's pockets, which then we'll capture through our sales taxes, and then we'll probably have more money than we know what to do with. That's how I'm looking at it. But we need to get this done and go forward. We are so close. My chief of staff, who's been in Harrisburg for the last 26 years, I've been blessed, I believe, with the best chief of staff in Harrisburg. And Fred Sembach told me, we had discussion yesterday when we were done with our meetings. He said, you know, Mike, he says, we're as close, and this is the best bill that he's seen on real property tax reform since he's been involved with the chamber and since he's been in Harrisburg. That this is the best bill, and we are so close. And the other neat thing about this bill was, it was really neat to work with my colleagues across the aisle, with Senator Swank, Senator Liedike, and the other Democrats who got involved with this bill, to work in a bipartisan way to do the business of the people, to do that which is right. And then finally, I just want to thank the Pennsylvania Realtors Association and all that they've done. Give them a big hand. They have really stuck their neck out. And they've stepped out over and have gotten beat up in Harrisburg with some of my colleagues and so forth. So it's not fun where they've been, believe me. They need your support. They've done a great job, and they've given us legitimacy, and they've given us real facts, and we've got the numbers to prove it. So don't get down. We're not over the finish line yet. We're really close in the Senate. We're really, really close in the Senate. And we got to get that floor vote. That's the key. We get it out of the Finance Committee. Contact all your members in the Finance Committee. Contact. You need them, get a hold of me. I'll get you the names, and you can get a hold of them. And then we get that out of there, and then we press the issue, get a floor vote, and then we'll let the chips fall where they are.
I've said enough. Just keep it simple. I want to thank everyone who's here tonight. Representative Swanger, Senator Folmer, Jim for inviting us, and as Senator Folmer said, they've been wonderful to us, and thank all of you. This is a grassroots effort. We need you. Please get involved.
Some perspective. Overall, David and I have done a lot of grassroots support across the state, but the biggest thing is I'm also very active in Harrisburg, and we talk a lot about our state associations, whether it's the state chamber or what have you, that are more or less right now against Senate Bill 76. I'll tell you right now, as Senator Folmer indicated, we have had some leadership come out to us and try to strong-arm us in being against it. But the thing is, although there are other organizations that are currently also getting strong-armed against it, it's interesting when David and I are speaking out to these local businesses, these local builders, these local groups, and all of them are starting to really support it. So really it all comes down to, again, getting the word about Senate Bill 76 out there. I can't echo that enough. The more and more you talk about Senate Bill 76, the more people actually understand what it's all about. And what we can do is a true grassroots movement locally and build it up in Harrisburg to finally see some sort of vote, hopefully in the very near future. Thank you.